breiten Faust an Lanzenschaft, die Zügel in der Linken, so springt des Reiches Ritterschaft und ihre Schwerter blinken. Heya, 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 und ihre Schwerter blinken. Heya, 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 und ihre Schwerter blinken.
Hello, and welcome to Lex Rondi, Lex Credendi. I am Kenny, and it has been a while since I tried to do these videos, so I am attempting to do the second part of my traditional Latin Mass versus the Novus Ordo. I had to re-listen to the old one because it's been so long since I did the last one, so I refreshed my memory a little bit, and I decided that I pretty much said everything that needed to be said about the changes in the new Mass, the things that were taken out, and all the bootanini, anyway, all that stuff. So I am actually going to read from the SSPX website where they have their critiques. It's I've kind of skimmed over it, so if I stumble over some of it, it's because I've read most of it, but not all of it. I just needed to see basically what it was going to be. I fully trust these guys, so I'm not, there's not going to be any weird stuff here. Okay, the traditional Mass versus the new Mass, or the Novus Ordo. A criticism of the new rite cannot be a criticism of the Mass in itself, for this is the very sacrifice of our Lord bequeathed to His Church. But it is an examination whether it is a fit rite for embodying and enacting this august sacrifice. It is difficult for those who have known nothing other than the new Mass to understand of what they have been deprived, and attending a Latin Mass often just seems alien. To see clearly what it is all about, it is necessary to have a clear understanding of what the Church teaches about the Mass. Only in the light of these can the new rite of the Mass be evaluated. Sorry if I stumbled over that a little bit, but that happens. All right. So now they have a list of reasons why the Latin Mass is good and why the Novus Ordo is at best questionable, if at worst just outright wrong. All right. So in the traditional Mass, 2,000 years of venerable use, well, almost 2,000 years. Tried and true. That is correct. It is the same Mass from the very beginning. The Novus Ordo, fabricated in 1969 and completely experimental, which is true. The Latin Mass, clearly a sacrifice, an altar, and a priest. The Novus Ordo Mass, clearly a meal on a table. And that is very true. I do recall that I had very much emphasized the fact that the Novus Ordo it goes on the whole Lord's Supper ideal more than anything. And it just completely bypasses the sacrifice. It still claims to be a sacrifice, but the emphasis is gone. It's a meal in the Novus Ordo, and it's a sacrifice in the Latin Mass. Again, emphasis, not necessarily reality. But the emphasis is what makes people behave a certain way when they go to Mass. If they know it's a solemn sacrifice, If they get that feel whenever they go, they are going to behave in a certain way. If they go to something that's supposed to be like a meal, they're going to behave in another way, which is irreverent. All right. The Latin Mass, centered on God, structured for reverence. Again. And then the Novus Ordo, centered on man, loose structure, and invites abuses. This is very true. Completely Catholic, the Latin Mass, completely Catholic, one Holy Catholic and Apostolic, and then the Novus Ordo, half Protestant, lacks all four marks. This is very true. Being a former Protestant, I very much see the Protestantism in the Novus Ordo. At first, I didn't really notice it, but I also really wasn't paying attention whenever I first got there. The only thing I was worried about was, hey, I'm in the right church. This is where I need to be saved. So I really didn't pay that much attention until I started finding out about the Latin Mass, because I started getting this feeling like there was something wrong. And then I started picking up on this as I started learning more. The Latin Mass, codified after the Council of Trent. Codified because it already existed from the beginning. It just developed up to that point, and then it was St. Pius V that basically made the Latin Mass the Mass of the Church. And so, obviously, there were exceptions. He said any Mass that does not have at least, I think it was 200 years standing, was allowed to remain, but everything else had to go, and it had to be Latin Mass, period. The Novus Ordo was contrived after the Second Vatican Council with the help of 6 Protestant ministers. That is a big red flag. If you have to bring heretics in to figure out how to construct this supposed new Mass, then that is a humongous red flag. Like, you do not want this if you are a Catholic. Period. Like, it just does not work. All right. The Latin Mass, fruitful, multitudes of saints, martyrs, religious vocations. This is true. Although that does not mean that, there weren't periods of time where people just weren't being very Catholic, and, vocations may have been a little poor at certain points. But the Latin Mass has always inspired vocations. The Novus Ordo, barren, empty. Seminaries decreased, mass attendance, massive defections, all of that happened because of the Novus Ordo. So, yeah, you just basically, with the Novus Ordo, since it's Protestantized, you're competing with the other Protestants, which, I'm sorry, if you're going to have a Protestant service, the Protestants are just always going to do it better, just because they're outright heretics, and they're not trying to look Catholic. So they're ultimately going to do it better. And it's going to run people out. I mean, it's like, okay, yeah, again, lex orandi, lex credendi, the name of this channel. The law of prayer is the law of belief. You pray like a Protestant, you're going to be a Protestant. If you pray like a Catholic, you're going to be a Catholic. So that is, of course, where that a massive problem with that. Now, for the Latin Mass, and this is continuing with the fruitfulness of the Latin Mass, I think, by this our decree, to be valid in perpetuity, we determine an order that never shall anything be added to or omitted or changed in this missal. Pope St. Pius V, Quo Primum, July 19th, 1570. This is actually one of the things that uh, really made me go and gun hard for the Latin Mass, because since it was codified and in quo primum itself, it basically says that if you try to mess with the Latin Mass, uh, or try to forbid it or whatever, you anathema, you be accursed. And so that was one of the reasons why I'm so against the Novus Ordo. Now, I mean, I'm not saying we should throw it out immediately, because uh, we already had a jarring experience with the Latin Mass just being ripped out one day, and then you have this, Protestant service put in its place. So, you can't do that, because it's going to make people that might otherwise stay leave. And so you need to do this gradually. You need to take into consideration that there's these people that's all they've known is the Novus Ordo. And so you have to bring it in gradually, slowly transform the Novus Ordo back into the Latin Mass. All right, with the Novus Ordo, again, the new liturgy, non-Catholic communities will be able to celebrate the Lord's Supper with the same prayers as the Catholic Church. Max Thurian, Protestant minister of, I'm going to mispronounce this, Taize, Taze, or so, anyway. Nothing in the renewed Mass need really trouble the evangelical Protestant. That's a problem. M.G. Siegwald, Protestant professor of dogmatic theology of Strasbourg. That is a problem. And so you can't you can't have a new Mass where Protestants are saying, "Oh yeah, this is totally great, we love it." Well, that's a problem. I mean, if the Protestants are totally cool with it, now it would be different if the Protestants were wanting to then convert to Catholicism because of it. But that's not what happened. So, moving on. Okay, the traditional Mass never abrogated, and as we pointed out in quo primum, cannot be abrogated. The new Mass, an experiment that, well, it just says an experiment that failed, but it failed in a spectacular fashion. Now, moving on from the list, now we have just regular paragraphs here. The Novus Ordo Missae, considering the new elements widely susceptible to. Okay, let me do that again. The Novus Ordo Missae, considering the new elements widely susceptible to widely different interpretations, which are implied or taken for granted, represents both as a whole and in its details a striking departure from the Catholic theology of the Mass as it was formulated in session 22 of the Council of Trent. The canons of the Rite definitively fixed at the time erected an insurmountable barrier against any heresy which may attack the integrity of the mystery. Cardinals Otaviani and it's either Bacchi or Bacci, I can't remember how to say that. The Otaviani Intervention. The pastoral reasons put forth to justify such a grave break, even if such reason could still hold good in the face of doctrinal considerations, do not seem sufficient. The invocations of the Novus Ordo and the fact that all that is of perennial value finds only a minor place if it subsists at all, could well turn into a certainly could well turn into a certainly I think that's a typo. Could well turn turn certainly into a superstition. There we go. Already prevalent, alas, in many circles, that truths which have always been believed by the Christian people can be changed or ignored without infidelity to that sacred deposit of doctrine to which the Catholic faith is bound forever. The recent forms have amply demonstrated that new changes in the liturgy could not be made without leading to complete bewilderment on the part of the faithful, who already show signs of restiveness and an inaudible lessening of their faith, or an indubitable lessening of their faith. I misread that. Among the best of the clergy, the result is an agonizing crisis of conscience, numberless instances of which come to us daily. Cardinals Otaviani and Bacci, the Otaviani Intervention. What is the new Mass? Some of the elements that make up the new Mass are Catholic: a priest, bread and wine, genuflection, signs of the cross, etc. But some are also Protestant: a table, communion place, utensils, communion under both kinds, and in the hand, etc. The new Mass mixes these heterodox elements alongside the Catholic ones to form a liturgy which would marry the Church and the world. Catholicism and Protestantism, light and darkness. Indeed, the Novus Ordo Missae presents itself as a meal rather than a sacrifice. This is shown by its use of a table around which the people of God gather to offer bread and wine, and to communicate from rather commonplace utensils, often under both kinds, and usually in the hand. Note to the almost complete deletion of references to sacrifice. Again, I believe I said that. A mere narrative of a past event, this told out loud by the one presiding, who recounts our Lord's words as read in Scripture rather than pronouncing a sacramental formula, and who makes no pause until he has shown the host to the people. If I understood that paragraph correctly, I believe he's talking about the fact that after the consecration of the host, he does not genuflect. Bear in mind, we're talking about in the Novus Ordo. The priest does not genuflect until after he's elevated the host and shown it to the people. Whereas in the Latin Mass, as soon as he consecrates it, he immediately kneels, there's bells rung, and then he stands up and elevates it, bells are rung. And so that is a major difference. A mere narrative of a past event, this told out loud by one presiding. Okay, never mind. I already read that part. All right. A community gathering, Christ is perhaps considered to be morally present but ignored in his sacramental presence. There are also a great deal of rubrical changes. The celebrant facing the people from where the tabernacle was formerly kept. Just after the consecration, all acclaim, he will come again. Sacred vessels are no longer gilt, and the sacred particles are ignored. The priest no longer joins thumbs and fingers together after the consecration. The vessels are not purified as they used to be. Communion is most frequently given in the hand, and genuflection on the part of the priest and kneeling on the part of the faithful are much reduced. The people also take over much of what the priest formerly did. That's talking about, like, you know, doing the homilies, the Eucharistic ministers, um, you know, lay people doing like the music director at the church and all of that stuff. Because again, in the Latin Mass, the priest does everything, and everybody else is just there to help him hand him the stuff that he needs. Uh, Carry the book from one side of the altar to the other. They're just there to assist the priest, but the priest does everything. Okay. Judgment on the Novus Ordo Missae. The Novus Ordo Missae, even when said with piety and respect for the liturgical rules, is impregnated with the spirit of Protestantism. It bears within it a poison harmful to the faith. Archbishop Lefebvre, an open letter to confused Catholics. The dissimulation of Catholic elements and pandering to Protestants, which are evident in the Novus Ordo Missae, render it a danger to our faith, given that it lacks the good which the sacred rite of Mass ought to have. By their fruits you shall know them. We were promised the Novus Ordo Missae would renew the Catholic fervor, inspire the young, draw back the lapsed, and attract non-Catholics who today can pretend that these things are its fruits. Together with the Novus Ordo Missae, did there not intend instead come a dramatic decline in Mass attendance and vocations? There we go. An identity crisis among priests, a slowing in the rate of conversions, and an acceleration of apostasies. So, from the point of view, its fruits, the Novus Ordo Missae is not a rite conducive to the flourishing of the Church's mission. Does it follow from the apparent promulgation by the popes that the Novus Ordo Missae is truly Catholic? No, for the indefectibility of the Church does not prevent the Pope personally from promoting defective and modernist rites. In other words, Novus Ordo. In the Latin rite of the Church, let us remember that a Pope engages his infallibility not only when he teaches on faith and morals or legislating on what is necessarily connected with them, but when so doing with full pontifical authority and definitively. That was Vatican I from Denzinger, 1839 edition, I guess. Or no, 1839 was Vatican I. All right. Well, this actually goes on further, and, actually, no, there's not that much left. I guess I'll go ahead and finish it. Okay. Who made up the Novus Ordo Missae? Well, I already went over this, but let's see what the society says. It is the invention of a liturgical commission, the concilium, whose guiding light was Father Annibale Bugnini. There we go. Made an archbishop in 1972 for his service, and which also included 6 Protestant experts. Father Bugnini, principal author of of Vatican II's Sacrosanctum Concilium, there's a problem, had his own ideas on popular involvement in the liturgy. Buttini La Riforma Liturgica Centro Liturgico Vincenziano. Okay, I think that was Italian. I'm not sure. 1983. While the Protestant advisors had their own heretical ideas on the essence of the Mass, but the one on whose authority the Novus Ordo Missae was enforced was Pope Paul the Sixth, the Sixth, or I always get these Roman numerals mixed up. Yeah, it's the Sixth. Who promulgated it by his apostolic constitution, Missale Romanum, April 3rd, 1969. The six Protestant observers with Paul VI, Dr. George Canon Jasper, Dr. Shepherd, Dr. Coneth, Dr. Smith, Brother Max Thurin. They represent the following Protestant organizations: the World Council of Churches, the Church of England, the Lutheran Church, and the Protestant Community of These. There's that word I couldn't pronounce. And anyway, that's the end of the article. And anyway, so I think that pretty much very well states what a lot of the problem is with the Novus Ordo versus the Latin Mass. I mean, it's just, it's very Protestant. It's very irreverent. It's questionable validity in some cases. And again, the way you pray is the way you believe. Again, pray like a Protestant, become a Protestant. It's just how it works. It's logical. It's not something people like to hear, but it's logical. You cannot, under any circumstances, expect that if you Protestantize the Catholic Mass, that people are going to stay Catholic. So I guess I'll end this with, pray for the return of the Latin Mass, especially here. Bring a return of Catholic faith to the best of your ability, whether you live here where I do, where we're trying to get the Latin Mass, or you are in another area where you just don't have access to the Latin Mass. Just do the best you can. Get yourself a Latin Missal. Start buying the traditional books. I'm reading a lot of Bellarmine lately. I'm still reading through the Devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. I've got the Catechism, Council of Trent, Pius X, Baltimore Catechism, and I feel like there's one more, but I can't think of it at the moment. But I've got all those. I've just finished reading again the Rule of St. Benedict. Again, more Bellarmine. I've got the Pascendi from Pius X, along with many other examples. And these are all good things that you should read. Start learning your faith to the best of your ability. The book, I've got Ryan Grant's, Bellarmine in 5 books on the Roman Pontiff. After that, I'm reading on the Church. The one on the popes is thick. It's going to take me at least a year to finish that, because I hate reading. It takes me forever. Because I'm good. Because as you can tell, whenever I was reading on this video here, whenever I'm reading, I'll read something and like just at first glance, it looks like it's a different word than it's actually there. So I end up having to go back and reread stuff and make sure that I read it right. But anyway, pray your rosary every single day. Get yourself a brown scapular. Get enrolled if you haven't. I've been doing the Little Office of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which is part of the brown scapular. So if you can do that as well. Pray for our Holy Father Pope Francis and our Bishop Michael Olson, that they will that both of them will revive tradition. I mean, I don't think it's likely on either one of them, but hey, miracles happen. So until next time, Deus Vult.